Exercise 2, we're going to use this diagram to answer those questions. So this is kind of like what she was talking about. Like on the top would be like 0 all the way to 5. Remember, it was 5 total questions. And so like these were like 0, 1 question, 2, 3, 4 out of 5. And then this is percentages, so you go from 0 all the way to 100. If you split the percentages up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you split 100 up into 5s, then you're going to skip count by 20% on the bottom, whereas the top you're just going by 1s to get to 5. So 80% is what fraction of the whole quantity, and that's kind of what we were just showing here. 80%, so let me find 80%. That would be 80% out of 100 as a fraction. So we would write 80 out of 100. Is that the same thing as, now look up here, is that the same thing as 4, which is the part, out of 5, which is the whole? Is 80% the same thing as 4, the part, out of 5 to whole? So it's like the top part's the quantity on the test, and then this part right here is like your percent. And that is true. So could we use this to figure out 1/5 is what percent of the whole quantity? So 1 out of 5, 1 out of 5. 1 is the part, and 5 is the whole. So they want to know what percent, right? A percent is a number out of 100. So if I look up there on that tape diagram and I look up 1 to 5 is the same thing as, instead of 1 to 5, now look at your percents, is the same thing as 20 out of 100, which is the same thing as 20%. You can solve that cross products. 1 times 100 is 100. And then you get 100 and you divide by 5, and that's how you get 20. 50% is what fraction of the whole quantity? Now I think 50%, what's that as a fraction? That's half, or we think 50 out of 100 because a percent's out of 100. So then what would that be out of 5? Why did I know it had to be out of 5? Well, 5 is the whole amount if I look at my tape diagram. So it's kind of like, okay, well, let's come up here to the tape diagram. If I had to put 50%, I would put the percent right here. 50% is right in between 40 and 60, right? Right in half, right in the middle. Then what's right in the middle of 2 and 3? 2.5. So it's 50% out of 100 when you're looking at percents, but when you look at 2.5 out of 5, when you look at the quantity. So when I move this up here, then that would be 2.5 would be the part out of the whole. So some people kind of start to see this. Again, you could solve this cross products to figure that out. 1 is what percent of the whole quantity? 1 whole is what percent of the whole quantity? Oh, 1 whole is like saying 5 out of 5. You got 5 right out of 5 on the test. Well, wouldn't that be 100 out of 100? So wouldn't 1 whole be the same thing as 100%? Yes. So 100% is the same thing as 1 whole. Turn the page. We're going to do some more examples here where they're giving us a fraction and we have to find the percent, decimal. Maria completed 3/4 of her workday. Create a model that represents what percent of the workday has been worked. So 3/4 of her workday. 3 would be the part, and 4 would be the whole amount. So if I write that as a fraction, 3 out of 4, part out of whole. What percent is that? Remember, percents are out of what? They're always out of 100. So if we set it up out of 100, some people know what 3/4 is as a percent. Some people see what you could multiply to get to 100. If I do cross products, 3 times 100, 300. Divide by the only number left, 4. And that leaves me 75 out of 100. Oh, so 3/4 is the same thing as 75% is what she has worked. Some people could see like, oh, 4, I could have just made the ratio bigger by timesing it by 25. So take 3 times it by 25. Some people know 3 out of 4 is the same thing as 75 out of 100. So if she's worked 75%, then they ask what percent of her workday does she have left? Well, that would leave us 25% that's left. How do I know 25% is left? That would leave us 25 out of 100. And if I divide both of those down and I simplify this ratio, that's the same thing as saying 1/4 is what she has left. 1/4 is what she has left because 3/4 is what she already worked. 3/4 and 1/4 would make the whole day. Remember, 75% is what she worked and 25% is what's left. And if you add those two together, that would be 100%. 75% plus 25% would give me the whole workday, which is 100%. A couple ways to think about that. How does your model prove that your answer is correct? 3 out of 4 is the same thing as 75 out of 100, which was 75% that she worked. And then if I do the other side, 1 out of 4, which is 25 out of 100, gave us 25% she has left to work. Kind of makes sense because 3/4 and 1/4 add up to 4/4. And if you look at the 75 and 25 would add up to be 100. All right, let's try this one. This one's completed 5/8 of their workday. What decimal would describe the portion of the workday he has finished? So they gave you the fraction 5/8, but they want it as a decimal. So like 5 is the part, this is the fraction, sorry, and they want it as a decimal. So 5 is the part that's worked out of 8, which would be like the whole amount or the total. How do I make it a decimal? Well, you could take 5, divide by 8. Now they wanted a decimal, right? 8 doesn't go into 5. So we add a decimal and a 0. Decimal goes straight up. 8 does not go into 5, so nothing goes here, but goes into 50. What's that, 6 times? 48. I get a 2. Let's add a 0. 8 goes into 20. What's that, 2 times? That gives me 16. I'm going to subtract, continue on, 4, add another 0. That's 5 times, I get 40. Sorry, I went into that one. But 5/8 as a fraction converts to 0.625 as a decimal. Or you could have taken 5 divided by 8 on your calculator, and that would have equaled 0.625. Use your calculator. So you could make a fraction into a decimal pretty easily too. You just divide 5 divided by 8. How could you use the decimal to then get the percent that he's completed? So if we have the decimal, we said that was 0.625. How do we make that a percent? We just move the decimal over. Some people call it timesing it by 100. I say move the decimal twice to the right. Then that would leave us 62.5% is what he has worked. He has worked. So how do you change a decimal to a percent? They look a lot alike. You just move the decimal over twice to the right or times it by 100 to get 62.5. Let's look at this table to kind of help with fractions and decimals and percents again. Can we complete this table from fractions to decimal to percent? You should be able to do all of these. Remember, fractions can be any number, but decimals and percents, we would like them to be out of 100. So can we make our fraction out of 100? That's what I would think. So I would set it up cross products. Can I make my fraction 1/8? Can I make it a number out of 100? Sure, cross products. Use my calculator. 1 times 100, get 100, divide by 8. My calculator shows 12.5 out of 100. So you just made your fraction bigger. Instead of 1/8, that would be 12.5 out of 100. So as a percent, that's pretty easy. That would be 12.5%. Why is it that? Because it's out of 100. Remember, percents are out of 100. Whatever that number is, that's your percent. As a decimal, I just move the decimal back 2 places. 125. And I just kind of look at this one to change it to there. Well, what if they give you the decimal, 0.35? So can you move the decimal over to get 35%? I just moved it over in my head. 35% would be 35 out of 100. Now that fraction's not simplest form. You could make it smaller. That would be what, 7 to 20 if you divided them both by 5 to make it smaller. You don't have to make your fraction smaller, but I kind of like making it smaller. You make it out of 100 first, and then you can make it smaller. This one, 84.5%. So that to me would be 84.5 out of 100. Some people think that looks weird because there's a decimal in there on top of the fraction. So in order to get rid of the decimal, you can times it by 10. And then that's 845. But then now that's out of 1,000 instead of out of 100. But you can get rid of the decimal. 84.5% as a decimal. You just move the decimal back 2 places. 0.845 is your decimal. And I'd like you to try maybe the last 2 on your own. And if you want to try that, pause the video and then you can check back to see how you did with me. When I see the decimal, I would just move it over twice. 32.5%, which means 32.5 out of 100. If you don't like the 0.5, you can take it times 10 and make it 325 out of 1,000. 2 out of 25 is a fraction, but I like my fractions out of 100. It just makes it easier when I'm trying to find my percent. Some people see times it by 4 to make it bigger. If you do cross products, 200 divide by 25, I get 8 out of 100. So that's 8% as a decimal. I got to move it back twice this way, 0.08. You got to be careful here that you don't put 0.8. Could the 0 be in front? Yeah, you could put zeros in front of these decimals. You don't have to. Couple ways to look at that. Once you get it out of 100, I think it makes it easy to find your percent. Exercise 6, choose one of the rows and how we can prove that our answers are equivalent. So I'm going to pick the second row of the table. Let me move this down a little bit. Circle it. So how are we proving that the fraction that they gave us, or that we had, 7 to 20, is a part out of a whole? Could we make that fraction a number out of 100? And why did we make it a bigger fraction? Why did we choose out of 100? Because percents are out of 100. And so, cross product, 7 times 100. 700 divided by 20 gives us 35 out of 100. So both of these are fractions. Let me move this up so you can see, sorry. Both of those are fractions. 7 out of 20, you can make it bigger, 35 out of 100. Why do you choose out of 100? Because then that makes it easy to find your percent, which is 35%. That also makes it easy to find the decimal. Once you get the percent, the decimal is just 0.35. You move it over twice. Those are all the same. Turn the page, and this is your homework. Your homework for lesson 25. You're not going to use these grids. You don't need them. Your homework, they're just showing you how fractions, you can make them larger to get them out of 100. Once you get it out of 100, you can get a percent. You can take a fraction, you could make it a decimal. Once you have a decimal, you can make it a percent. They even showed you, again, the tape diagram. I like cross products, so you can use cross products here. This is your homework for lesson 25. It is page S115. Make sure you are using cross products. You may use a grid, but you may not want to use like tape diagrams. So they're asking for tape diagrams.